Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining on International Literacy Day 2020 for a truly international event about the business of books and how a business-focused approach can advance literacy and ensure we reach global goals of universal literacy by 2030. Now, my name is Carol DeSilva, and I am the Senior Advisor for the Global Book Alliance. The mission of the Global Book Alliance is to transform the lives of millions of children in developing countries by working with public, private, and civil society partners to identify, promote, and support innovations, best practices, and policies that will change the way books are created, procured, and provided. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by a truly cross-sectoral and international panel covering the US government from Washington, DC, a global tech company represented by their India office, an international convener of publishers represented by their vice president located in the Middle East, and a publishing social enterprise based in Kenya. So why are we talking about the business of books, and why are we talking about it on International Literacy Day? Well, globally, we know that 367 million primary school children do not possess the basic reading skills necessary to thrive in society. And most of those are actually enrolled in school. Studies have demonstrated the importance of high quality reading materials in supporting learning. A World Bank study even deemed textbooks one of the most cost-effective learning inputs, and particularly when they are in the local language that students speak and understand and used in class with an effective teacher. So we know the importance of books. But despite their importance, both print and digital books are largely absent or in short supply in far too many classrooms and also in children's homes globally. So the GBA's focus is on closing this book gap and ensuring that children globally can access developmentally appropriate books in languages that they speak and understand. And to do that, we need partners from across all sectors. No single approach can address all the elements needed to create a thriving book market. So through its flagship initiatives, including the Global Digital Library, National Book Supply Chain Analyses, the Begin with Books Award through the All Children Reading Grand Challenges, and our support for publishers, the Global Book Alliance is working with partners to address the global shortage of high-quality books in underserved languages. And really, who better to support in that work than this group of panelists today? We know that a business-focused approach to increasing literacy rates can support closing the book gap, as well as work as a force multiplier to other key development efforts, paving the way for greater economic growth, health outcomes, democratic governance, and peaceful and resilient societies. So with that in mind, let's meet our panelists and we'll start this conversation. We will have a brief Q&A session once we've heard from all of our speakers. So please feel free to send in any questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and writing your questions there, and we'll be monitoring that during the webinar. So our first speaker today is Julie Cram. Julie Cram is the Deputy Assistant Administrator of the Bureau of Economic Growth, Education, and Environment at USAID. She currently serves as a Senior Coordinator of the U.S. International Basic Education Assistance, where she has oversight for all the resources and activities for international basic education, working across 10 U.S. government agencies and departments. She's also USAID's Senior Coordinator for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. Prior to joining USAID in January 2018, Julie worked in both private and government sector roles, including serving as a Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush and his Director of Public Liaison and in strategic public affairs positions at TerraStar Networks, Burstyn Marsteller, and HDMK. Julie is going to speak today to the role of USAID in ensuring access to books, with a particular emphasis on the role of the private sector. So I'm now going to turn it over to Julie Cram. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Carol, and good morning, and thank you all for having me today. I am so pleased to see some familiar names and organizations, as well as many new ones. First, let me say Happy International Literacy Day, and there is no better day to discuss how access to books will increase literacy rates in every context where we work. As you know, there have been major strides in education enrollment over the past 15 years. Yet in many low-income countries, more than half of the students in the early grades cannot read a single word, even in their local languages. The evidence supports the importance of books in improving learning and reading outcomes, and yet many children lack access to both reading books and textbooks. Today, as we all know, this challenge is made even more great because of COVID. In addition to disrupting education for billions of children and youth, the crisis has shined a light on the fact that millions of children do not have access to books. At USAID, we understand that access to high-quality books in language that children and youth use and understand is absolutely essential for gaining literacy and furthering their own development. For this reason, USAID is a founding member of the Global Book Alliance. Why is this so important? Currently, half of the world's population is under 30. These young people represent the future engineers, doctors, teachers, entrepreneurs, and leaders of their countries. Without education, which starts with basic literacy, millions will not receive the education, skills, training, and opportunities needed to fulfill their potential. There is an estimated 440 million young people that will enter the labor market by 2023 in Africa alone. Yet, for these millions, employment prospects are limited and they lack the foundational skills, including literacy, necessary to succeed. So how do we help fix this problem? Despite the evidence of their importance, there simply are not enough books in the countries where we work. Where there are books, they are often of low quality or not written in languages the teachers or students use and understand, including their own local languages. This is simply unacceptable. If we are to meet our goal of ensuring all children and youth have equitable access to a quality education, we need more books that are appropriate, accessible, affordable, and varied. Equally as important, we must ensure that resources are equitable and inclusive to all learners, especially the most marginalized. In many contexts, children have to learn to read using books shared up to as many as 5 learners. While we need to create quality books in the necessary languages, we also need to strengthen the ability for books to get into the hands of children through schools, through the internet, and through the marketplace. We know that we cannot do this alone, and success will require better coordination across all stakeholders, and we will need new partners at the table. In 2019, USAID launched its private sector engagement policy. We are committed to building partnerships with the private sector to strengthen and sustain positive development impact in the countries where we work. And the book chain represents a core challenge to literacy and essentially the business side of literacy. By improving the book chain's efficiency and effectiveness, building transparency and forecasting into public procurement, and creating opportunities for profitability, together we can expand access to books, build a culture of reading, and increase literacy rates. USAID's involvement in supporting the work of the GBA is an exciting opportunity to work together with the private sector to address this challenge. The GBA's core mission is indeed cultivating a deep understanding of the global, national, and local book supply chains so that partner countries, donors, and implementing partners can organize our joint financial, material, and human resources to mitigate challenges in improving access to books. For example, over the next 2 to 3 years, USAID will contribute to GBA's work in this area by conducting book supply chain analyses through our missions in 8 countries that will document and analyze different components of the book value chain, including those shaped by the private sector. To date, we've nearly completed one in Malawi and one in Cambodia, and we plan to have another 6 completed before the end of 2022. The GBA will use those findings and evidence from these analyses to work with both public and private partners in these contexts until supply chain functions yield books that allow every child and young person to learn to read and read to learn. Books are the essential commodity in education. By working together, we can ensure reliable, affordable, sustainable access to books to increase literacy rates in every context where we work. This increased literacy, in turn, can and will be a force multiplier to other key development efforts, paving the way for greater economic growth, health outcomes, democratic governance, and peaceful and resilient societies. I look forward to hearing from the other panelists, and again, thank them for joining us this morning and to discuss specific ways in which we can work together. And I look forward to our Q&A session. Thank you, Carol, and thank you all, and look forward to the rest of our day together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julie. I will now move from the US government perspective to understanding the role of the publishing industry in the business of books. And in doing so, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Bodour Al-Qasimi. Bodour is Vice President of the International Publishers Association. She's also founder and CEO of Sharjah-based Kalimat Group. She is a global trailblazer and authority in the international publishing scene, leading many diversity initiatives in her sector and promoting robust and cohesive regional hubs for publishing worldwide. Kalimat Publishing Group is a publisher of top quality Arabic children's books based in Bodour's native Sharjah and the wider United Arab Emirates, with 5 imprints under its umbrella and over 400 books published to date. She is passionate about integrating the UAE's publishing sector into a global context, and Bodour founded the Emirates Publishers Association, of which she's currently president, and which under her leadership has grown from 13 to over 175 members, and an active member of the International Publishers Association since 2012. Bodour is an avid advocate of the role of books and literacy in social development and has led through her own Kalimat Foundation for Children's Empowerment many campaigns to provide books for refugees and children all around the world. In 2019, she established Publish Her, a rapidly growing global platform to support women leaders in publishing. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Bodour for her comments.
Thank you, Carol, for the introduction, and thanks to the Global Book Alliance for hosting this webinar on such an important topic and on International Literacy Day as well. The discussion about literacy is very timely and has become even more critical right now in the context of the global shifts that are happening around the world. COVID-19 has disrupted education worldwide and in a very unprecedented way. and has again highlighted the harsh reality of literacy and educational inequalities as the most disadvantaged have been hit the hardest. This is why in IPA, we champion literacy as one of our core missions. And I'm personally a strong advocate of putting literacy back on the agenda of global publishing. I think it's particularly critical as developing and frontier markets are home to the readers of the future. As an initiator of some of IPA's activities in the Middle East and Africa, I've had the opportunity to engage deeply on literacy in both of these regions. Considering education and literacy as the sole responsibility of national governments has not solved the literacy challenge. And I believe there's significantly more the publishing industry can do to help build literacy skills and to promote reading. And especially now, as we navigate the phases of the COVID-19 crisis, it's become clear that literacy skills are more important than ever. According to some statistics, there are around 733 million men and women who are illiterate around the world. So it's critically important that literacy must come back in the headlines. Despite the enormous challenges we're facing right now and a drop of 80% revenues in some markets, many publishers worldwide have worked closely with their authors, with libraries and governments to organize virtual events with the aim to help people keep reading and keep learning. There are many examples of initiatives. I can't mention them all in the time and space we have today, but I just want to highlight one important initiative, which is called Read the World Initiative, which was started by my Chief of Staff, Ben Stewart. And it's a joint initiative between IPA, the WHO, and UNESCO, and it's targeting children and young people and aiming to engage them with books and knowledge in a fun and entertaining environment. And more information on that could be found on the IPA website and also on IPA's YouTube channel. And I just want to say that throughout my journey as a publisher and as the former president of the Emirates Publishers Association, and through my work in IPA, I've witnessed the positive correlation between a strong and dynamic local publishing industry and healthy levels of literacy and reading in many parts of the world. I also witnessed the opposite. So where we have weak local publishing industries, they can have a direct impact on literacy and reading levels. Obviously, a strong local publishing industry doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It requires serious collaboration and a conducive environment in terms of government policies, financial support, freedom to publish regulations, and a sound education infrastructure. As IPA, we strive to support local publishers and their associations. For example, we help them engage with their counterparts in government and other stakeholders to create the necessary context for them to develop and thrive. So supporting local publishers to develop robust publishing industry can be a bumpy road sometimes for social and political reasons. But in IPA, we're committed to continue our support. And as you know, promoting literacy and reading for everyone and everywhere is one of our most important foundations. We believe that literacy is a basic human right, and it's an essential complement to investment in infrastructure or roads or hospitals or factories. And I just want to quickly talk about IPA's convening power and IPA's partnerships. So IPA has brought together stakeholders in many parts of the world to help the developing publishing industry grow. For example, last year, IPA signed an MOU with APNET, which is the African Publishers Network, and ADEA, the Association for Development of Education in Africa. Through this MOU, we aim to come up with concrete actions to support collaboration and initiatives that focus on education and literacy. And IPA's engagement with African publishers is one proud example of how IPA leverages its experience and network to support the local publishing industry and local literacy programs. We also engaged with IBI, which is the International Board on Books for Young People, through IPA's Book Policy Committee, and signed an MOU to create different work streams, including IPA's UN Sustainable Development Goals Book Club. So this book club presents a selection of books for children aged 5 to 12, focusing on each of the 17 SDGs. And each month, a new SDG is in focus and a list of relevant books for children is announced. And the book selections are in the 6 official languages of the UN: Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. And more information on that could be found on IPA's website. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Bodour, for sharing all of the wonderful innovations that IPA is working on right now. And we're moving from innovation in the publishing sector to innovations in technology. Our next speaker is Nikita Baradia. Nikita is the product marketing manager at Google in their learning and education team based in Mumbai, India. Her current project, the Read Along app, is an early age literacy innovation devised with the social mission to help every child learn to read. Prior to her time with Google, Nikita worked with Unilever and Intel, building on her experience leading strategy and operations in developing markets. So now I'm going to turn it over to Nikita. Thanks.
Thanks, Carol. So excited to be here today. We heard about the importance of books. That's like the foundation before any literacy can happen. Even at Google, we believe that technology should enable some of these solutions and become a part of it. Now, early age literacy is exceptionally important. Without early age literacy, you start limiting the potential that the child has. Back in 2019, we launched an app called Read Along to solve for this exact problem. It was known as Bodour and it was launched in India. Bodour means to speak in Hindi, and that was the market where this app was first launched. The work for this started almost 2 years ago when one of our engineers who was in India and felt that some of the technology that we have within Google could be used for solving this problem of helping children learn to read. If we all recollect, right, when we were young, the way we learned how to read was by having someone give you access to the book and at the same time help you as you read and correct you wherever you got wrong or support you. That was the genesis for Read Along, where the way this app is designed is that there is an in-app assistant called Dia. She's sort of your friend and she will help a child learn to read. She can give you entire support in terms of reading the entire paragraph or maybe a single word if you tap on it. The app has interesting collection of amazing stories. These are digital books from a lot of open source platforms like GDL, supported by GBA, and Pratham Storyweaver and more. So these stories engage children and it gives them internal motivation.
Hello, everyone. So unfortunately, it looks like we're having some tech difficulties with Nikita at the moment. So perhaps what we can do is pause Nikita for the moment, and then we could move on to our next speaker. And then if we have a moment after that, we could come back and see if Nikita can come back on with us. So I think what I'll do is I will move on and I will introduce our next speaker. His name is Will Klurman, And Will is the CEO and co-founder of eKitabu, and he works in collaboration with the public and private sector partners to build a more sustainable education ecosystem that includes ministries of education and book publishers. So eKitabu is a Kenyan, Rwandan, and US social enterprise that develops open source software and programs to lower cost and widen access for inclusive and quality education. Before founding eKitabu in 2012, Will worked for mobile internet pioneers, including Netscape. And Will is a former school teacher in the US and also has a master's degree from MIT. He and his family currently live in Nairobi. And so I'm going to turn it over to Will, and perhaps we can go back afterwards to Nikita. Thanks, Will. Welcome.
Thank you, Carol. And happy International Literacy Day. Thank you to the Global Book Alliance. And I want to pick up on Deputy Assistant Administrator Cram's remarks because she said something that particularly resonated for me and for us in our team and the work that we do in eKitabu. When she said that books are an essential commodity in improving learning outcomes for all children, that's our starting point in eKitabu. And in this present moment, when many people are looking to technology to address remote learning challenges in the 13 countries of Africa where we work, we rely on technology primarily for two things. One, to widen access, to bring accessibility to books and to teaching and learning materials that are accessible in languages that children and their teachers, also their parents, can use and understand. The second thing that we believe technology is good for is reducing cost. Now, we do have a saying in our team that if it doesn't reduce cost, it's not technology, it's just cost. We believe that strongly, and so we seek in any of the work that we do in collaboration with government, in collaboration with international development partners. We work in many places with USAID in All Children Reading, and we're very supportive of the focus on early grade literacy as a way to help children, families, and nations on their journey to self-reliance. We believe that through local publishing and local authorship, and this is of local materials for education, storybooks, textbooks, and books in general that are developed locally, sustainably by publishers in the country, in the languages that people in the country, children especially, can use and understand. That's where culture grows. That's how, again, to pick up on comments that Julie Cram made, that's how children can learn to read, but then also read to learn. So I think we have a slide. Let's see if it works. So just as an example, and some people in the attendees I know are familiar with this work in Studio KSL that USAID and All Children Reading have supported. KSL is Kenyan Sign Language, but this is an accessible early grade reading book developed in USAID Tusome in Kenya. It's a story called Marion's Best Day. And we developed this, we adapted this book from the original storybook. These are the original illustrations, but the adaptation that we've done in collaboration with the Kenyan government is to add Kenyan Sign Language, which is a local language that is recognized in the Constitution of Kenya. We've added a sign language adaptation to this open source, open standards-based video storybook that we developed in Studio KSL. So Kate or Carol, let's see if we can play the video, and if Okay, the playback's pretty good. So to members of the audience, you're not hearing the audio track because of a playback issue, it seems. But that's okay. You're experiencing Marion's best day as a deaf child would, without sound. But one of the most exciting things about the work that we do, thank you, Kate. One of the most exciting things about the work that we're doing in Studio KSL is that through the use of sign language storytelling, combined with audio and music, deaf children and hearing children are able to enjoy learning to read together. To us, that's a big deal. And it begins with this most precious of commodities, the book. So I want to turn it back to our hosts, but I just want to emphasize that through harnessing, first of all, the power of books and locally developed materials, locally published, locally authored materials for children to learn to read, and leveraging those materials through the power of digital technology, then if we do well, if we think sustainably, if we design for scale, then we have the opportunity to widen access to literacy for all children, including children with disabilities. So all children, as UNESCO recently reminded us, I think some people on this call must know where I'm going, all means all. When we speak of all children, we're talking about children with disabilities, children without disabilities. We're talking about children who have different learning styles and preferences. Am I okay? Sounds like it. So technology gives us some help in that direction, as Nikita was pointing out too. But meeting the local content, meeting the local publishers where they are, and working with them to widen access to books is central to sustainability. That's the comment I wanted to share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Will. And thank you for reminding us of that important message that all children really means all children. So I am going to now try and throw it back over to Nikita to continue her statements and her explanation of the Read Along app, which is really interesting. So let's hope it works this time. Go ahead, Nikita. Thanks.
Thank you so much. The work from home creates its own set of challenges. All right. So while we were designing this app, which is now available globally and in more than 10 languages, there were three things that we took care of. One, the app works offline, which means that once you have downloaded the app, there is no internet required for using the app. Second, this app was designed for children's privacy and security, and hence any personal sensitive data or information stays directly on the app. Any kind of voice analysis for TTS happens on device. Third, there are no ads on the app so that children can have a good reading experience as they go along. Moving on to the next slide. All right, while the usage numbers are good, but we also wanted to check what is the impact that the technology can have on actual reading outcomes, not just reading. What we did last year was we partnered with 4 NGOs in India. India is the market where we have done most amount of work. And we did a third-party assessment for these partners. Our goal was to understand if there is an impact on reading outcome, but at the same time also understand what are the kind of models that work the best when our partners take it to ground. What we had 3 different models. There was a direct-to-home model that our 2 partners, Sharjah and Kevil Education Foundation, enabled. In this model, the facilitator takes the app to the parent and talks about what this can benefit them for, and child gets access to the device on parent's phone or guardian's phone. There was a
an indirect model where we shared this app with the teachers, and once we had done that, teachers spoke about this in the PTA meetings. The last bit was the community model, where in a community there was a shared tablet, and on that shared tablet, the device was used. What we found in the study across 25 districts, 5 states, and a union territory in India, and across 5,000 children, was across all the 3 languages, we saw an incremental impact of 40 to 100% in the test group as compared to the control group when it comes to their reading abilities. And reading ability was tested on ASR tool, which is a very common standard used in a lot of Asian and African markets, developed by Pratham. We also found something very interesting, that almost 60% plus parents felt that their children's confidence increased after using the app. Their children, 80% plus parents felt that their children were interested in learning a new language with books which are available now at home. This was a very good experience for us to get back, that learning to read does have an impact on holistic development for a child, and technology can solve this problem in partnership with right partners on the ground. So it's making the job that the partners are doing easier in a way, and this is the goal that we had from the outset. Next slide, Tracy. So how are we going forward from here? And it's a very important question on International Literacy Day. The way Read Along works is, this was an app designed to be a solution in the holistic solution that our partners are designing. On outreach side, we have lots of NGOs which have picked up this app, and they're using it in their respective models and taking learnings from whatever we have done so far. On the content side, most of the content on the app is from open source libraries. For example, GDL, which is supported by GBA, has almost contributed to 40 plus stories on the app right now. We also get donations on stories from some partners, and at the same time, we pay for stories when the content is very relevant for the young learners that we're talking of. We are open to partnering with any organization and any content partner that's interested in taking this forward, and happy to connect offline for that. On the occasion of International Literacy Day, we also want to encourage parents to read to their children. So we are today launching a global storyathon competition, and Carol is also one of the panelists on the forum today, so it's very exciting to have her as well. As part of this, we are encouraging parents to read stories and submit a nice submission from their young authors. We would be publishing some of those stories on the app as well as on GDL and Pratham Story Weaver as part of this. So do share it with your respective NGOs or partners if they have, if they have reached the parents. With that, yes, I would like to end our session on Read Along. I know there are some questions on the Q&A, and I can take that with respective participants over there itself on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikita, and I'm so pleased we were able to get your full presentation. Very good. Tech is helping us today. Okay, so now we're going to move into some questions. We have one question for each of the panelists, which we will ask, and then we will, if we have time, we'll ask 1 or 2 questions that have come from the audience. We had some submissions prior to the webinar, and then we have some popping up here. We won't be able to get to all of the questions today, of course, but we'll do our best to ask some that seem to be coming up frequently. So, so the first question I would like to ask is for Will. And I think, given the context of the global health pandemic that we're in right now, this is very timely. So Will, could you tell us a little bit about the experience of your social enterprise and how your business has had to sort of pivot or respond during this global health pandemic?
Sure. Thank you, Carol. When in March, the government of Kenya shut the borders and declared a lockdown, or at least a shutdown, let's say, as policies have varied in the places where we work, but our headquarters is in Kenya. We knew things were going to be a bit different. of course, schools were closed, and schools are now closed in Kenya until January. At the same time, we knew that remote learning was a challenge and has been a challenge that we and many others in the ecosystem are working to address, and to find ways to lower cost and widen access for all children. So the government of Kenya, knowing that children were out of school, in fact, reached out to us and said, hey, we know you guys have been working in digitizing the Kenyan curriculum. We know you've been adapting the materials for early grade learners. And we know that you are bringing accessibility to those materials for the sake of including more children in quality education, in particular children with disabilities. And they were particularly interested in the fact that the data they have indicate that there are more deaf children in schools than the other major disability categories on which they collect data in the Kenyan primary school system. So they knew that there were a lot of children who are deaf or hard of hearing who are out of school during the pandemic, and they wanted to find some ways to keep those children learning to read at home. They asked us if we had anything we could do to help. And in fact, through the work that we've done under the All Children Reading Grand Challenge Sign On for Literacy, in which we developed Studio KSL and then scaled it also from Kenya to Rwanda, we had been producing these video storybooks that you guys saw in the earlier presentation. And well, those video storybooks, we've been packaging them in the open standard EPUB format. We'd also been distributing them in projects and for general use in YouTube. But we realized very quickly that we could broadcast those same video materials. And so instead of slowing down during the pandemic, we accelerated, because the government of Kenya, in their broadcast strategy, needed accessible learning content for inclusion of deaf learners. We took the storybooks that we developed in Studio KSL under Sign On for Literacy. We packaged them up into 30-minute episodes for broadcast on Kenyan national television. And the Ministry of Education has been so enthusiastic, and the reception has been so warm from parents who are parents of both hearing children and deaf children, that they've now included digital story time. That's what we decided to call it. They've included digital story time in regular programming on KICD Edu Channel TV. That's the ministry's national educational channel. So they're broadcasting daily now on KICD Edu Channel. And this is the first, I don't know if it's a first in the world, but it's certainly a first in Kenya, where in normal learning of the term, as the ministry calls it, they are now including a segment that has sign language, local sign language, built into the instructional materials for all children. And what we've seen in practice is that hearing children and deaf children are watching digital story time and learning to read together, even learning Kenyan Sign Language together. So, I mean, the watchword for us was accelerate. If we, you know, we saw how things were going, we saw the winds blowing from in the pandemic time from January, and we began to try to strategize about what we could do. And when the government of Kenya reached out, we were ready, and we believe it's a win for all children in the system.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Will. And I will mention, I don't think that we'll be able to get to all of them, or maybe not even some of them, but there are a number of questions in the Q&A that are focused on the issue of digital books and access to digital books in places where there's low internet penetration. So that might be interesting for you to take a look at if you can. But in the meantime, I'd like to move over to our next speaker, Julie. from USAID, and I wanted to ask her, you stated that the private sector partnerships are really a key element of the USAID education policy more broadly. And I was hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about why it's so important for USAID to see private sector partnership in the book publishing sector specifically.
Sure, and thanks, Carol. And can I just say to Will, your example and adaptation and innovation around COVID is just so exciting, and so I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that. It's an inspiration to us all, and how when crisis hits that there can be unforeseen accelerations, as you said, and we firmly believe that at USAID in our education team in particular. And so I just wanted to thank you for inspiring us to do even more together, which goes to the heart, I think, of Carol, your question about why is the private sector partnerships in the private sector so key? And frankly, in one word is sustainability. Two words, sustainability and leverage. I think at the end of the day, the book chain in particular is a market-based approach, and many of the key elements of that market-based approach obviously reside with and within the domain of the private sector. Publishing, printing, technology, and logistics industries really offer a unique set of skills and talents to address this gap. Businesses are often inherently much more flexible. They're much more adaptable. They're innovative, and all of those things are not necessarily words you use to describe the public sector. And they also have the added value of financial incentive to respond quickly to opportunities and to help develop new markets. We heard about some of these examples today, in particular around responding to the COVID-19 crisis. Both Will and Nikita from Google, who was able to launch the Read Along app, draws on a variety of sources that are vetted, open education materials, including the Global Digital Library, which I think is something that's very exciting, and one of the Global Book Alliance's flagships initiative. And I think also when it comes to systems and logistics, the private sector, really brings efficiency and effectiveness to the distribution process. We all know and have seen, I'm sure, that books can go astray at any stage in the distribution process, and governments and donor agencies can't necessarily, when those books arrive at schools, unless we have a strong logistically sound system around and being able to track those, we have no way of figuring out where those books may have got lost in transit. Of course, that's just one example of the importance of logistics and systems, but it goes to the heart of how the private sector is able to test and refine and innovate supply chain management strategies, is a good example of being able to grow our supply of books. So I hope that answers your question. That's to say we have a long way to go from a donor, from USAID's perspective, and partnering effectively and most importantly efficiently with the private sector. But we are intentional about it. I know our team is very intentional about it, and so finding that sweet spot is where we're after. And so thanks for the question, and I look forward to hearing the other answers from our co-panelists.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julie. I'm going to move on now to our next panelist, Bodour. And I think, Bodour really highlighted a lot of the innovation that the International Publishers Association is doing. And I was hoping, Bodour, that you could tell us a little bit more about one particular area of innovation, which is the IPA's Africa Publishing Innovation Fund.
Sure, Carol. So I'd like to talk about the Innovation Fund and its relation to the Africa Regional Seminars. So one of IPA's most successful initiatives was the series of seminars that we hosted in Africa. They were called the Africa Regional Seminar Series, and these were held in Lagos and in Nairobi. And through these seminars, we stepped up our commitment to our African colleagues, as global readership right now is shifting to more diverse content, more multicultural content. And because we believe that this wonderful continent has a lot to contribute to the global cultural development. As many of you know, Africa has the highest growing population of young people in the world, and the promotion of literacy in Africa faces so many challenges, mainly access to universal education, absence of enough adequately trained teachers, and this is not to mention that most African governments don't allocate enough budgets to the development of education, which leaves a huge gap to be filled. The Africa seminars also led to IPA's partnership with Dubai Cares on the Africa Publishing Innovation Fund, which involves an $800,000 commitment to support innovative projects that address literacy and reading. Last year, we supported 5 projects that focused on indigenous language publishing and literacy development projects, as well as renovating 2 libraries in Kenya, one in the outskirts of Nairobi and the other in Kakuma refugee camp. This year, our fund focuses on innovative projects related to digital and remote learning solutions in Africa. And I'm so happy to say that we were inundated with submissions. Our committee is going through all the applications right now, and we will announce the winners later in the year. For anybody who's interested to learn more about the Africa Innovation Fund, you can go to our website, which is apinnovation.fund. And lastly, I know we're running out of time, so I just want to add a few closing remarks from my side. I just want to stress that literacy is at the core of dreams and aspirations of children, families, and nations, and it offers a path out of poverty, and it's critical to developing healthy, productive citizens and cohesive societies. So as an industry, we must partner together to create societies in which citizens see themselves as members of a community which views reading as a significant and enjoyable activity. And in building a culture of reading and instilling reading habits from an early age is essential. So the more people read for pleasure, the better off our countries and the world will be. Thank you again for all the questions. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Bodour. So we have one more question for our panelist, Nikita from Google. So Nikita, we're interested to know a little bit more about how the social mission of the Read Along app works alongside the business mission at Google. And I think this is perhaps a tension that some of the questions in the Q&A are bringing up. So I think it would be really interesting to hear your perspective on this.
Definitely. So we are part of a learning and education team at Google. This team has a lot of other products as well. So if you've heard about Google Classroom or G Suite or an app called Socratic, maybe in the US market, we are part of the same family of products. However, Read Along was started with the mission to help with universal literacy. We had a very bold mission as we don't have any monetization goal on this particular product right now. This product doesn't have any ads inside it. There is no subscription model as such, and it's freely available on Play Store. So this is how it is. It's a very social first product, and that's the goal that we're trying to maximize through all the partnerships that we're doing. When it comes to monetization, there are other products in the family of products in learning and education who have right business models to achieve that. Read Along is not attuned on those lines.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Nikita. That's very helpful. I think, unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have enough time to probably take any audience questions. I will mention, though, that I think one theme that I'm seeing in these questions, both in the questions that were submitted before the webinar and that have popped up during, really focus on this issue of local publishers. I think that, you know, Will and Bodour's mentioning of this has really resonated with a lot of people. And it sounds to me like one of the big questions is, you know, what are the challenges and what are the difficulties that there might be faced in really supporting local publishers to produce titles and also to disseminate them both in print form and in digital form in schools and in homes. So I think that's a theme that has come up, as well as the issue related to the market-based approach and how that might hinder the publishing of books in underserved languages because the market for those books might be smaller. So those are some of the themes that I'm seeing pop up, all really important questions. And I think what we will do is we'll have a chat after the webinar and see if there's a way that we can perhaps respond to some of these questions, maybe even in the development of some future webinars that focus on some of these really rich and robust topics. I'm getting a thumbs up from Will, so it looks like he might be on board for something like that. With that, I would like to just say thank you so much.